Hi everybody. Welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra, and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels. Pardon me. My hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze, whatever brings you joy. So, sit back, relax, and grab a cup of tea. Tonight we jump back into Erin Hunter's Fire and Ice, the second in the Warrior Books first series. Chapter 10. Fireheart woke at dawn with the image of his sister still clear in his mind. He pushed his way out of the den, hoping the routine of the day would distract him. It was another cold, frosty morning. Whitestorm and Longtail were waiting near the camp entrance, preparing to leave on patrol. Mousefur padded past on her way to join them and greeted Fireheart with a cheering mew. Whitestorm called for Sandpaw, who came racing out of her den just in time to follow the patrol as it pounded out of the camp. It was a scene Fireheart had watched many times, but for once he didn't yearn to join them as they thundered away into the morning fresh forest. He padded across the clearing, wondering if Cinderpaw was awake yet. Brindleface was just squeezing out of the narrow nursery entrance. A speckled kit followed her, then one more. A third kit, pale gray, with darker flecks like the other, tumbled out and fell onto the ground. Brindleface picked it up by its scruff and placed it gently back on its paws. The tenderness of Brindleface's actions brought Fireheart's dream flooding back. His mother had probably done the same for him. He knew that Brindleface's fourth kit had died soon after it was born, and she seemed to love the remaining kits even more fiercely now. Fireheart was overwhelmed by a pang of envy at the thought that the other cats here all shared something he did not. They were all clan-born. Fireheart had always been proud of his loyalty to the clan that had taken him in and given him a life he would never have known as a kitty pet. He still felt that loyalty. He would die to protect ThunderClan, but no one in the clan understood or even respected his kitty pet roots. Fireheart felt certain that the she-cat he had seen yesterday would. With an ache in his heart, he wondered what memories they might share. Fireheart heard Graystripe's heavy paw steps behind him. He turned to greet his friend, stretching his head to touch Graystripe's nose and ask, "Could you take Cinderpaw for the day?" Graystripe looked curiously at Fireheart. "Why?" "Oh, it's nothing important," replied Fireheart as casually as he could. "I just wanted to check out something I saw yesterday. Watch out for Cinderpaw, though. She doesn't listen to orders very well. Don't take your eyes off her, or she'll be charging off in every direction." Graystripe's whiskers twitched with amusement. "She sounds like a pawful. Still, it'll be good for Brackenpaw. He never charges off anywhere without thinking about it carefully first." "Thanks, Graystripe." Fireheart bounded away toward the camp entrance before his friend could remember to ask him where he was going. As the two-leg place came into view through the trees, Fireheart dropped into a crouch. He opened his mouth and breathed in the cold morning air. No sign of a ThunderClan patrol, and no two-legs scents either. He relaxed a little. Slowly he approached the two-leg fence where he had seen the she-cat disappear. He hesitated at the bottom and looked around, sniffing the air once more. Then he leapt, landing on a fence post in one easy jump. No two legs to be seen, just an empty garden with its strongly scented plants. Fireheart felt exposed on the post. The branch of a tree hung low overhead. Its leaves had gone, but it would be easier to hide there. Silently, he pulled himself up and lay down to wait, flattening himself against the rough bark. Fireheart could see a swinging flap in the entrance to the two-leg place. He had used one just like it as a kid. He fixed his gaze on the flap, hoping his sister's face would appear at any moment. The sun rose slowly into the morning sky, but Fireheart started to feel cold. Damp branch was drawing the heat from his body. Perhaps the two legs were keeping his sister shut in. After all, her kidding would be soon. Fireheart licked a paw and wondered if he could go back to the camp. Suddenly he heard a loud clatter. Fireheart looked up and saw his sister pop out through the swinging flap. The fur along his spine rippled with anticipation, and Fireheart fought to stop himself leaping down into her garden straight away. He knew he would frighten her, as he had done yesterday. He smelled like a forest cat now, not a friendly kitty pet. Fireheart waited until his sister had reached the end of the grass. Then he crept to the tip of the branch and slipped down onto the fence. Quietly, he jumped into the bushes below. She-cat's scent brought his dream flooding back to him. How could he get her attention without frightening her? Desperately, he searched his mind, trying to think of the name his sister had been given. He could remember only his own kitty pet name. Fireheart called softly from the bushes. "It's me, Rusty." The she-cat stopped dead and looked around. Fireheart took a deep breath and crept out from the bushes. The cat's eyes widened with terror. Fireheart knew how he must appear to her, lean and wild, with the sharp forest scent on his pelt. The she-cat raised her hackles and hissed ferociously. Fireheart couldn't help feeling impressed by her courage. In a flash, he remembered his sister's name. "Princess, it's me, Rusty, your brother. Do you remember me?" Princess remained tense. Fireheart guessed she was wondering how this strange cat could know these names. He dropped into a submissive crouch, hope soaring in his chest as he watched his sister's expression slowly change from fear to curiosity. "Rusty?" Princess sniffed the air, wide-eyed and wary. Fireheart took a careful step forward. Princess did not move, so Fireheart edged closer. Still, his sister held her ground until Fireheart was standing only a mouse length away. "You don't smell like Rusty," she mewed. "I don't live with two legs anymore. I've been living in the forest with ThunderClan. I carry their scent now." She probably never heard of the clans, Fireheart realized, remembering his own innocence before he'd met Graystripe in the woods. Princess stretched her nose forward and rubbed her muzzle cautiously along his cheek. "But our mother's smell is still there," she murmured, half to herself. Her words filled Fireheart with happiness until her eyes narrowed and she took a step backward, her ears flat with distrust. "Why are you here?" she asked. "I saw you yesterday in the woods," Fireheart explained. "I had to come back to speak with you." "Why?" Fireheart looked at her in surprise. "Because you're my sister? Surely she must feel something for him." Princess studied him for a moment. To Fireheart's relief, her guarded expression lifted. "You're very thin," she mewed critically. "Thinner than a kitty pet, maybe, but not thin for a forest cat," Fireheart replied. "Your scent was in my dream last night. I dreamed of you and our brothers and sisters, and..." Fireheart paused. "Where's our mother?" "She's still with her housefolk," answered Princess. "What about..." Princess guessed what he was going to ask. "Our brothers and sisters? Most of them live near here. I see them in their gardens from time to time." They sat silently for a moment, then Fireheart asked, "Do you remember the soft bedding of our mother's basket?" He felt a flicker of guilt about longing for such kitty pet softness, but Princess purred. "Oh yes, I wish I could have it for my own kidding." Fireheart's discomfort faded. It felt good to be able to talk to such a tender memory without shame. "Will this litter be your first?" Princess nodded, uncertainty showing in her eyes. Fireheart felt a wave of sympathy. Even though they were the same age, she seemed to him very young and naive. "You'll be fine," he mewed, remembering Brindleface's kidding. "You look as if your two legs treat you well. I'm sure your kits will be healthy and safe." Princess moved closer to him, pressing her fur against his flank. Fireheart felt his heart swell with emotion. For the first time since he was a kit, he caught a glimpse of what the clan cats must take for granted. The closeness of kinship, a common bond determined by birth and heritage. Suddenly, Fireheart wanted his sister to know about the life he led. Do you know about the clans? Princess gazed at him, mystified. You mentioned ThunderClan. Fireheart nodded. There are 4 clans altogether. He went on, the words tumbling out. In the clan, we take care of each other. Younger cats hunt for elders. Warriors protect the hunting grounds from the other clans. I trained all Greenleaf to become a warrior. Now I have an apprentice of my own. Fireheart could see by her bemused expression that his sister couldn't understand everything he was telling her, yet her eyes brightened with pleasure as he spoke. It sounds as if you enjoy your life, she mewed in awe. A 2-legged voice called from the house. Fireheart instantly darted under the nearest bush. I should go, Princess mewed. They'll be worried if I don't go back, and I have many tiny mouths to feed. I can feel them moving inside me. She glanced at her swollen belly, her eyes soft. Fireheart looked out from beneath the bush. Go then. I have to return to my clan anyway, but I'll come back and see you. Yes, I'd like that, Princess called over her shoulder. She was already trotting back toward her 2-legged nest. Goodbye. See you soon, Fireheart called. His sister disappeared from view, and he heard the swinging flap shut behind her. Once the garden was silent, Fireheart crept through the bushes to the fence. He jumped over it and ran into the forest. Memories of Kithood's scents crowded his mind, suddenly more real than the sense of the forest around him. Fireheart paused at the top of the ravine and looked down at the ThunderClan camp. He didn't feel ready to go back yet. He was worried that if it would all seem strange to him. I'll go and hunt, he thought. Cinderpaw would be safe with Graystripe for a while longer, and the clan would welcome any extra fresh kill. He turned away and headed back into the forest. When he finally returned to camp, he carried a vole and a wood pigeon in his mouth. The sun was setting, and the clan cats were gathering for their evening meal. Graystripe sat alone beside the nettle clump, a fat chaffinch at his paws. Fireheart nodded to him as he padded across the clearing to the pile of fresh kill that had already been collected. Tigerclaw was sitting below the high rock, his amber eyes narrow. I noticed Cinderpaw spent the day with Graystripe. He meowed as Fireheart dropped his catch onto the pile. Where were you? Fireheart returned Tigerclaw's gaze. It seemed a good day for hunting, too good to waste, he replied, his heart thudding in his chest. The clan needs all the fresh kill it can get at the moment. Tigerclaw nodded, suspicion darkening in his eyes. Yes, but we also need warriors. Cinderpaw's training is your responsibility. I understand, Tigerclaw, Fireheart meowed. He dipped his head respectfully. I'll take her out tomorrow. Good. The deputy turned his head and looked around the camp. Fireheart picked up a mouse and carried it over to eat next to Graystripe. Find what you were looking for? Asked Graystripe absently. Yes, Fireheart felt a pang of sorrow for the pain in his friend's eyes. Are you thinking about the River Clan warrior? I do try not to, answered Graystripe quietly. It's just when I'm alone I can't help remembering Barkface's prediction of an unnecessary death and trouble ahead. Here, Fireheart interrupted and pushed his mouth towards Graystripe. That chaffinch looks like it'll be half feathers, and I'm not that hungry. Want to swap? Graystripe shot him a grateful glance, and the 2 friends exchanged prey and began to eat. As he crunched on the chaffinch, Fireheart scanned the clearing. He could see Sandpaw and Dustpaw outside the apprentice's den. Dustpaw was busy ripping apart a rabbit. Fireheart caught Sandpaw's eye, but she looked away. Cinderpaw lay beside the old tree stump, where he'd shared many meals as an apprentice. She was chatting enthusiastically to Brackenpaw, who nodded from time to time while plucking the feathers from a sparrow. Seeing the 2 young cats, brother and sister, lying together, so at ease, reminded Fireheart once more of Princess, and for the first time the familiar sights of his clan made Fireheart feel uneasy. He had been careful to lick his sister's smell from his fur before returning to camp, but it was her scent that lingered in his nostrils as the sun disappeared over the distant horizon. He had found the closeness he had missed, but it had given shape to a sense of loneliness that, until now, had lain vague and nameless in his heart. Were the deep-rooted memories he shared with Princess stronger than his loyalty to the clan? Chapter 11. Another day of sunshine, Fireheart purred to Graystripe, feeling his flame-colored pelt glow in the weak morning sun. Thanks to the fine weather, he had visited Princess nearly every day recently, slipping away to see her between patrols, hunting, and training sessions. Now he walked with his friend along the short trail to the sandy hollow where Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw would be waiting. "Let's hope it stays clear for the rest of the leaf bear," Graystripe meowed. Fireheart knew how much his thick-coated friend hated rain. When Graystripe's fur got wet, it clung to him and stayed damp long after Fireheart's shorter fur had dried off. The two warriors arrived at the edge of the hollow just as Cinderpaw pounced on a pile of frosty leaves, sending them flying in all directions. She leapt and twisted to catch one as it fluttered back to the ground. Fireheart and Graystripe glanced at each other amused. "At least Cinderpaw will be warmed up and ready for today's assignment," Graystripe observed. Brackenpaw jumped to his paws, looked up at his mentor, his eyes wide. "Good morning, Graystripe," he meowed. What is today's assignment?" "A hunting mission," Graystripe told him. He padded down into the hollow, followed by Fireheart. "Where?" mewed Cinderpaw, dashing towards them. "What are we going to catch?" "We're going to Sunning Rocks," Fireheart replied, suddenly sharing her enthusiasm, "and we'll catch whatever we can." "I'd like to catch a vole," declared Cinderpaw. "I've never tasted vole." "I'm afraid everything we catch today goes straight back to the elders," Graystripe warned. "But I'm sure if you asked one of them nicely, they'd be happy to share." "Okay," mewed Cinderpaw. "Which way is Sunning Rocks?" She bounded up one side of the hollow and peered into the forest, her tail sticking straight up. "This way," meowed Fireheart, leaping up the opposite side. "Okay." Cinderpaw raced down the slope and across the hollow, and up to Fireheart's side, sending falling leaves flying everywhere. Graystripe leapt up and caught one as it drifted past his nose. He pinned it to the ground with a purr of satisfaction and saw Brackenpaw staring at him. "Never miss a chance to practice your hunting skills," Graystripe told him quickly. The four cats made their way along the familiar scent trails to Sunning Rocks. The sun was above the trees by the time they emerged into open territory. Ahead of them, a slope of rock rose out of the soft earth, its smooth surface lined with cracks. The cats had to narrow their eyes as they looked at it. After the shade of the woods, the flat rock face reflected the sun with a dazzling glare. "This is Sunning Rocks," Fireheart announced, blinking. "Come on." Feels nice," mewed Cinderpaw as she raced up the stone slope behind him. Fireheart realized she was right. The stone felt comfortably warm and smooth after the ice-cold forest floor. They rested at the top, where the far side fell away steeply into the forest. Fireheart listened to the gentle bubbling of the river that followed the RiverClan border, following down from the uplands. It touched the Sunning Rocks before turning to run deeper into RiverClan territory. He could barely hear it. Perhaps the water was low after the dry weather. Fireheart stretched out, enjoying the warmth of the rock beneath him and the soft heat of the sun on his pelt. He closed his eyes, feeling proud to be lying there, a place where generations of Thunderclap cats had come to warm themselves, and which they had battled hard to keep. Graystripe joined him. "Come on," he meowed to the two apprentices. "Make the most of the sun while it's here. There are enough cold, damp days ahead of us." The two apprentices lay down beside their mentors and purred as the warmth seeped into their fur. "Is this where Redtail died?" asked Brackenpaw. "Yes," Fireheart answered cautiously. And where Tigerclaw avenged his death by killing Oakheart?" Cinderpaw piped up. Fireheart's fur prickled as he remembered Ravenpaw's account of the fight, that Redtail had been responsible for Oakheart's death, and then Tigerclaw had killed Redtail, the deputy of his own clan. Fireheart pushed away the disturbing thoughts and replied, "This is the place." The two apprentices fell silent and looked down the slope in awe. Suddenly Fireheart heard a noise. He pricked his ears. "Hush," he hissed. "What do you hear?" The two apprentices strained their ears forward. "I think I can hear some scrabbling," Brackenpaw whispered. "It might be a vole," murmured Graystripe. "Can you tell where it's coming from?" "Over there!" mewed Cinderpaw, leaping to her paws. The scrabbling noise became more furious and then disappeared. "I think it heard you," Fireheart remarked. Cinderpaw looked crestfallen. Brackenpaw purred with amusement at his sister's clumsiness. Never mind, meowed Graystripe. Now you know that it's better to creep up slowly, especially on voles. They're fast. Sit still and listen, Fireheart advised. Next time we hear something, work out where it is, and then begin to move toward it very slowly. A mouse could probably hear even the rustling of your fur, so let him think it's just the wind blowing across the rock. The cats remained where they were, no one daring to move until they heard the scrabbling sound again. His ears pricked. Fireheart rose and crept forward, placing each paw noiselessly in front of the other until he reached the edge of a small crack that ran across the rock face. He paused. The scrabbling noise continued. Fireheart lunged forward and reached down into the crack with a forepaw. He scooped out a fat vole that had been hiding in the shadows and flung it onto the bright stone. It squealed as it landed, but the hard ground stunned it, and Fireheart finished it off quickly. Wow, mewed Cinderpaw. I want to do that. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of chances. For now, let's get back to the forest, meowed Graystripe. Aren't we going to catch anything else? Cinderpaw protested. Did you hear that vole squeal? Meowed Fireheart. Cinderpaw nodded. Well, so did every other creature around here. The prey will be hiding for a while. I should have caught it and killed it before it can make a sound. Graystripe's whiskers twitched with amusement. I wasn't going to say a word, he purred. Fireheart picked up the dead vole in his mouth, and together the cats headed down the slope and began to trek onward through the forest. After the open warmth of Sunny Rocks, the woods seemed chilly, even though Sun-High was approaching. Fireheart smelled fresh markers at the RiverClan border. Beyond them, the ground sloped down to meet the river. A leaf fluttered down towards Brackenpaw. The young cat immediately leapt up and caught it between his paws. He landed, looking pleased with himself. Well done, called Graystripe. You'll have no trouble with voles. Brackenpaw looked out, doubly pleased. Nice catch, Brackenpaw, Cinderpaw mewed. She nudged her brother's shoulder with her nose before turning to stare down the wooded slope. The river's quiet today, Fireheart mumbled through his mouthful of vole. That's because it's frozen. That's because it's frozen, mewed Cinderpaw excitedly. I can see it through the trees. Fireheart dropped the vole. Frozen? Completely? He stared down the wooded slope. The river glinted at the bottom, frosty and still. Could Cinderpaw be right? Fireheart's paws tinkled with excitement. He had never seen the river frozen over. Can we have a look? Asked Cinderpaw. Without waiting for an answer, she bounded past the scent markers. Fireheart's excitement turned to panic as he saw the small gray cat disappear into RiverClan territory. He couldn't call after her. He didn't want to alert any RiverClan patrols that might be in the area, but he had to get her back. He left the vole where he'd dropped it and tore after her, Graystripe and Brackenpaw close behind him. They caught up with Cinderpaw at the edge of the river. It was almost totally frozen, apart from a narrow channel of dark water that flowed swiftly between two wide fringes of ice. Fireheart remembered White Claw with a shudder. He was about to suggest they leave when he noticed Graystripe's ears were pricked. Watervole, the Grey Warrior hissed. Sure enough, a small vole was scampering along the ice near the bank. Fireheart glanced at Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw, afraid that they might try to catch the tiny piece of prey, but neither apprentice moved. Fireheart felt relieved for a moment, and then his heart lurched as Graystripe dashed out onto the ice at hunting speed. Come back! Fireheart hissed. It was too late. The ice beneath Graystripe's paws gave a terrifying crack and broke. With a startled yowl, Graystripe fell into the water. He paddled madly for a moment before disappearing into the cold, dark depths of the river. Brackenpaw stared in horror, and Cinderpaw gave a desperate mew. Fireheart didn't quiet her. He was rigid with fear, staring into the water after his friend. Was Graystripe wrapped under the ice? Fireheart stepped onto the ice. It felt cold and slippery beneath his paws, impossible to run on. He jumped back onto the bank. Panic gripped him, then a blaze of relief as a drenched gray head appeared in the water farther along. But the relief turned to alarm as Fireheart saw the Graystripe was being carried downriver, turning and bobbing in the freezing waters. His paws thrashed helplessly, all his instincts to swim thwarted by the fierce current. Fireheart bounded along the bank, forcing his way through the bracken, but Graystripe was swept farther and farther away. Suddenly, Fireheart heard a yowl from the opposite bank and stopped. A slender silver tabby had leapt onto the ice farther downstream. She paddled lightly over the frozen sheet and slid into the river ahead of Graystripe. Amazed, Fireheart watched the she-cat swim strongly against the current, holding her position in the icy water with confident churning paws. As Graystripe was swept past, the tabby grabbed a mouthful of his fur between her teeth. But Fireheart's But to Fireheart's horror, Greystripe's weight pulled both cats under. He started running again, his eyes fixed on the river. Where were they? Then a silver-striped head appeared amid the rolling waters, pushing through the waves. The tabby was swimming against the current, dragging Greystripe with her. Fireheart could hardly believe that such a slender cat could swim with such a weight. The tabby grabbed the ice on Fireheart's side of the river with her forepaws, her neck craning awkwardly as she held Greystripe between her teeth. Slipping and sliding, she hauled herself out of the river. Greystripe hung limply in the water, twisting and turning as the current dragged at his fur, but the tabby kept a firm grip. Fireheart slid down the bank. Fireheart slid down the bank, raced across the ice. And skidded to a halt beside her. Without a word, he reached forward and took hold of Greystripe in his teeth. Together, the two cats heaved the soaking body out of the water and dragged him to the safety of the riverbank. Fireheart bent over his friend to see if he was breathing. He felt dizzy with relief as he saw Greystripe's slick gray flank rising and falling. Greystripe coughed and spluttered and spat out a mouthful of river water. Then he lay still. Greystripe, Fireheart meowed urgently. I'm okay, wheezed Greystripe. His mew was breathless but reassuring. Fireheart sighed and sat down. He looked closely at the silver tabby. She carried the scent of RiverClan on her. After seeing her swim, Fireheart wasn't surprised. The tabby returned his gaze coldly, shook herself, sat down on her sides, heaving as she got her breath back. Water streamed from her glossy fur as if her pelt were made from duck feathers. Greystripe turned his head and looked at his rescuer. Thanks, he croaked. You idiot, she spat, flattening her ears. What are you doing in my territory? Drowning, replied Greystripe. The silver tabby flicked her ears, and Fireheart saw a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Can't you drown yourself in your own territory? Greystripe's whiskers twitched. Ah, but who would rescue me there? He rasped. There was a tiny mew behind Fireheart. He turned to see Cinderpaw crouching by a clump of grass farther up the bank. Where's Brackenpaw? He asked. Just coming, answered Cinderpaw, pointing with her nose. Her brother was creeping nervously along the bank toward them. Fireheart sighed and turned to his friend. Look, Greystripe, we've got to get out of here. I know, Greystripe pushed himself to his paws, turned to the silver tabby. Thanks again. She dipped her head graciously but hissed, Hurry, go now. She looked over her shoulder. If my father knew that I'd rescued a ThunderClan intruder, he'd shred me for kit betting. Why'd you save me then? Teased Greystripe. The tabby looked away. Instinct. I couldn't watch any cat drown. Now go away. Fireheart stood up. Thanks. I'd have missed this furball if he'd drown. He nudged Greystripe. His friend hadn't even shaken the icy water from his fur. He was soaked to the skin. Come on, let's get back to camp. You're freezing. Okay, I'm coming. Greystripe meowed, but before he followed Fireheart up the slope, he turned back to the silver she-cat. What's your name? Mine's Greystripe. Silverstream, she replied, and bounded away, back onto the ice and over the channel of water to the far side. Fireheart and Greystripe led their apprentices through the bracken, toward the border. Fireheart couldn't help noticing that Greystripe looked back over his shoulder more than once. Cinderpaw noticed, too. The little gray cat glanced up, mischief dancing in her eyes. What a pretty RiverClan cat she was. Greystripe gave her a playful cuff around the ears. She ran on ahead. Stay with us, Fireheart warned in a loud hiss. They were still in RiverClan territory. He flashed Cinderpaw an angry look as she stopped and waited for them. If it weren't for her, they wouldn't be here at all, and Greystripe wouldn't have nearly drowned. He looked at his wet friend. Even though the gray warrior had shaken as much of the water from his fur as he could, his coat was still dripping, and ice was beginning to form on the ends of his whiskers. Fireheart quickened the pace. Are you okay? He asked Greystripe. Fine, replied Greystripe through chattering teeth. Sorry, mewed Cinderpaw softly as she fell into step behind Fireheart. He sighed. It's not your fault. He felt weighted down with worry. How were they going to explain this to the clan? No fresh kill for the elders. There wasn't time to go back for the vole now, and a soaked gray stripe. Fireheart shuddered as he thought how close he had come to losing his closest friend. Thanks, StarClan, that silver stream had been there to save him. The stream near the training hollow is still running with water. Brackenpaw meowed thoughtfully from the back. What? Asked Fireheart, puzzled out of his gloomy thoughts. The clan will probably assume that Greystripe fell in there, continued the young apprentice. We could say he was showing us how to catch a fish, Cinderpaw added. I'm not sure any cat would believe Greystripe would get his paws wet on purpose in this weather, Fireheart pointed out. Well, I don't want the rest of the clan to know I had to be rescued by a River Clan cat, yelled Greystripe with a flash of his old spirit. And we can't let them know we were in River Clan's territory again. Fireheart nodded. Come on, he meowed. Let's run the rest of the way. It'll help Greystripe warm up. The cats raced across the River Clan border and past Sunning Rocks. As the sun began to dip behind the treetops, they arrived back outside the camp. Greystripe's fur had dried a little, but frozen droplets hung on his whiskers and tail. Fireheart led the way through the gorse entrance. His heart sank when he saw Tigerclaw sitting in the clearing watching them. The deputy fixed his sharp eyes on Fireheart. No fresh kill, he growled. I thought you were meant to be teaching these two how to hunt today. You look half drowned, Greystripe. You must have fallen into a river to get that wet. His nostrils flared, and he drew himself up to his full height. Don't tell me you've been into River Clan territory again. Chapter 12. Fireheart lifted his head, about to speak, but Cinderpaw beat him to it. It's my fault, Tigerclaw. She stared boldly up at the great tabby. We were hunting on the frozen stream by the training hollow, on the bend by the deep pool. Even that bit was frozen. I slipped and Greystripe came to help me, but the ice wasn't thick enough for him, and it cracked and he fell into the water. Tigerclaw looked into her clear, bright eyes as she added, It really is deep there. Fireheart had to pull him out. Fireheart cringed, remembering how he had stood motionless with terror at the sight of Greystripe disappearing into the river. Tigerclaw nodded and looked at Greystripe. You'd better get yourself to Yellowfang before you freeze to death. The ThunderClan deputy stood up and stalked away, and Fireheart breathed a sigh of relief. Greystripe didn't hesitate. The long run home hadn't stopped his teeth from chattering. He bounded away to Yellowfang's den. Brackenpaw glanced at Cinderpaw and padded off to his nest, his tail drooping with exhaustion. Fireheart looked at Cinderpaw. Aren't you even a bit frightened of Tigerclaw? He asked curiously. Why should I be? Replied Cinderpaw. He's a great warrior. I admire him. Of course, why wouldn't she? Fireheart thought. You lie very well, he growled sternly, trying his best to act like a mentor. Well, I try not to, mewed Cinderpaw. I just thought the truth wouldn't be very helpful here. Fireheart had to admit she had a point. He shook his head slowly. Go and get warm. Yes, Fireheart. Cinderpaw dipped her head and charged after Brackenpaw. Fireheart padded over to the warrior's den. He was worried at how easily the story about Greystripe's soaking had tumbled from Cinderpaw's mouth. He also believed she was a well-meaning and honest cat. He thought of Ravenpaw, another good cat. Had the story he told about Tigerclaw killing Redtail simply been just that, a story that tumbled from his mouth in the heat of the moment? Fireheart shook the thought away. Ravenpaw had been terrified when he spoke to Fireheart. He obviously believed his own story. Why else would he have been frightened enough to leave the clan? Fireheart chose a few pieces of fresh kill and carried them over to the nettle clump. He settled himself beside it and began to gnaw thoughtfully on a mouse. The admiration in Cinderpot's voice when she had spoken of Tiger Claw worried him. It seemed as though he alone suspected there was more to the ThunderClan deputy than met the eye. Bluestar's attitude toward Tiger Claw certainly hadn't changed. She had been treating him with the same trust and respect that she had always shown him. With a flash of frustration, Fireheart ripped another mouthful from his mirror. A loud sneeze made him look up. Greystripe was headed towards him. "How are you?" Fireheart asked as Greystripe arrived, smelling of one of Yellowfang's herb concoctions. Greystripe sat down heavily and coughed. "I've saved you some food," Fireheart meowed, pushing a plump thrush and a vole toward his friend. "Yellowfang says I have to stay in camp. She says I have a chill." Greystripe meowed thickly. "I'm not surprised. What did she dose you with?" "Feverfew and lavender." Greystripe lay down and began to nibble at the thrush. "This'll be enough for me," he murmured. "I'm not very hungry." Fireheart looked at his friend in amazement. That wasn't something he had ever thought he'd hear Greystripe say. "You sure?" he asked. "There's plenty here." Greystripe stared down at the thrush and didn't reply. "Are you sure?" Fireheart repeated. "What?" Greystripe turned his faraway gaze on Fireheart. Yeah," he meowed. "You must have a fever," Fireheart decided, shaking his head. "Oh well, at least he was still here, thanks to that River Clan cat." A few days later, Fireheart woke to find the first fog of leaf bear filling the den. He had crept outside. He could barely see the other side of the clearing. He heard paw steps hurrying towards him, and Mousefur appeared out of the gloom. "Tiger Claw wants to see you," she meowed. "Right, thanks," answered Fireheart. Alarm shot through him. He had slipped away to visit Princess yesterday. Had Tiger Claw noticed? "What was that?" Greystripe's voice wheezed behind him. He sat down beside Fireheart, sneezed, and yawned. "Tiger Claw wants to see me." Fireheart looked at his friend. "You should be asleep." He was beginning to worry about Greystripe. He ought to have recovered by now. "Did you rest up yesterday?" he asked. "As much as I could between coughing and sneezing," complained Greystripe. "Then why weren't you in your nest when I got back from—" Fireheart hesitated, remembering he'd spent the afternoon talking with Princess. "Training." "Do you think I get any peace and quiet in there?" Greystripe flicked his head back at the den. "Warriors trooping in out all day. I found somewhere quieter, that's all." Fireheart was about to ask where, but Greystripe spoke first. "I wonder what Tiger Claw wants." Fireheart's paws prickled. "I'd better go find out." He could just see the shapes of Tiger Claw and Whitestorm through the mist, sitting below the high rock. As Fireheart padded over to them, they stopped talking, and Tiger Claw turned to him. "It's time Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw were assessed," he growled. "Already?" Fireheart meowed in surprise. Their apprentices had not been training for long. Bluestar wants to see how their training is progressing, especially with Greystripe being too ill to train Brackenpaw. If Brackenpaw is falling behind, she needs to know so she can appoint another mentor for him. Fireheart's tail twitched with annoyance. Surely Greystripe would recover soon. It would be unfair to entrust his first apprentice to someone else. "I've been taking Brackenpaw out with me and Cinderpaw every day," he meowed quickly. Tiger Claw glanced at Whitestorm and nodded. "Yes, but this is your first time as a mentor. It's a lot for you to take on, and ThunderClan needs well-trained warriors." "I know, and I'm just a kitty pet, not a clan-born warrior," Fireheart thought bitterly. He looked down at his paws, stinging with resentment. No one had asked him to take on Brackenpaw, and he'd been putting in a lot of effort with both apprentices. Tiger Claw went on. "Send Brackenpaw and Cinderpaw on a hunting mission through Tall Pines, as far as Two Leg Place. Keep an eye on them, watch them hunt, and report to me. I'll be interested to see how much fresh kill they add to the pile." Whitestorm added, "If Cinderpaw's skill match her enthusiasm, there should be plenty to eat tonight. I hear she is a keen apprentice." "Yes, she is," Fireheart agreed, though he was barely listening. Tiger Claw's words had set his heart racing. Why was Tiger Claw sending him to the two-leg place again? His own hunting assessment had been over exactly the same route, and Tiger Claw had seen him sharing words with an old kitty pet friend. He'd reported it to Blue Star, and she had questioned Fireheart's loyalty to the clan. Fireheart felt the fur along his spine begin to prickle. Was this Tiger Claw's way of warning him that he had been spotted talking to Princess? Fireheart twisted his head and gave his back a quick lick, brushing his bristling hairs flat with his tongue. He sat up straight again and calmly suggested, the Sunning Rocks would be an equally good place to test their skills. The sun there might have burned away some of the mists, too. No, growled Tiger Claw. The Dawn Patrol reported scenting River Clan at Sunning Rocks. They may have started hunting there again. Anger flared in his eyes, and his lip curled to reveal sharp teeth. They will need to be warded off before we do any more training there. For now, Tall Pines would be much safer for the assessment. Whitestorm nodded in agreement, while Fireheart's ears twitched uncomfortably at this news. River Clan at Sunning Rocks? He was lucky there hadn't been spotted by enemy patrols when Graystripe fell into the river. As for the fog, Tiger Claw continued smoothly. Hunting in difficult conditions will make the test more interesting. Yes, Tiger Claw, meowed Fireheart, ducking his head respectfully to the two warriors. I'll tell Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw. We'll get started right away. When Fireheart explained the assessment to the apprentices, Cinderpaw flicked up her tail and ran in an excited circle. An assessment? Do you think we're ready? Of course, Fireheart meowed, hiding his doubts. You've been working hard and learning quickly. But won't the fog make hunting difficult? Asked Brackenpaw. Fireheart replied, There are advantages to the stillness of the air. Brackenpaw looked thoughtful, then his eyes began to shine and he mewed. It'll be harder to sniff out prey, but it'll also make it harder for the prey to smell us. Exactly, Fireheart agreed. Shall we go, then? Cinderpaw asked. As soon as you like, answered Fireheart, but take your time, it's not a race. His words were wasted on Cinderpaw, who was already charging toward the camp entrance. Got till sunset, he called after her. Brackenpaw glanced at Fireheart and turned to follow his sister with a small sigh. Fireheart tracked the two apprentices through the tall pines. The springy layer of pine needles under paw felt strangely soft after the frozen ground in the rest of the forest. He followed Cinderpaw's trail until he could see her stalking eagerly through the forest. Then he picked up Brackenpaw's scent and followed that. The trails crossed here and there. Fireheart could smell where the apprentices had run fast, where they had sat down, even where they had lingered together at one point. Before long, Fireheart found a spot where Cinderpaw had made a kill. She had taken it with her. As he followed her trail, he could smell the scent of her catch mingling with her own. Then he discovered where Brackenpaw had caught a thrush. The feathers were scattered everywhere. The apprentices were hunting well. Fireheart knew this for sure when he detected a scent thick with fresh kill. He dug down among the needles at the roots of a pine. There was a stash of prey hidden underneath, left by Cinderpaw to pick up later. Fireheart felt a small glow of pride at her work. She had caught plenty, and now she was headed for the oak woods behind the two-leg place. Fireheart followed, just beyond the edge of the pine forest. He picked up Brackenpaw's scent. It was strong, which meant the apprentice was nearby. Fireheart crept forward and peered around a young oak. The apprentice was crouching beneath a tangle of brambles, well disguised among its shadows. Fireheart could just see his tail moving as it twitched from side to side. Brackenpaw had his eyes fixed on a wood mouse that was scrambling around the roots of a tree. Brackenpaw was taking his time. Good, thought Fireheart. He watched Brackenpaw draw himself forward, one step at a time. The leaves beneath his paws hardly made a sound. He was quiet as the mouse itself, which continued to hunt for food, suspecting nothing. Fireheart watched breathlessly, remembering his first hunting mission. Brackenpaw closed in. The soft rustle of his paws on leaves melted into the background sounds of the forest. Fireheart found himself wheeling the apprentice on. Brackenpaw was only a rabbit length away from the mouse now, his body pressed flat against the forest floor. The mouse scampered onto a root and looked around. It froze. Something was wrong. Now, thought Fireheart. Brackenpaw sprang and landed on the mouse, grasping it in his front paws. The mouse didn't have time to struggle. It was over in a single bite. Brackenpaw raised his head. Fireheart saw the satisfied expression on the young cat's face as he breathed the scent of his fresh kill. Then Brackenpaw darted away between the trees. Fireheart realized he was looking forward to reporting back to Tigerclaw about his apprentices. "Hi!" The small voice behind him made Fireheart jump into the air. He spun around. "How are we doing?" asked Cinderpaw, looking up at him with her head on to one side. "You're not meant to ask that," Fireheart spat and licked his ruffled fur. "You're not supposed to speak to me at all. I'm assessing you, remember?" "Oh," mewed Cinderpaw. "Sorry." Fireheart sighed. He would never have dared to approach Tigerclaw during his own assessment. He didn't want to scare Cinderpaw into obedience, as Tigerclaw had done with Ravenpaw, but he wouldn't mind a little respect every now and then. Sometimes he didn't feel like Cinderpaw's mentor at all. Cinderpaw looked at the ground for a moment, then glanced up at him, a puzzled expression on her face. "Were you really born over there, in Two-Leg Place?" The question caught Fireheart off guard. He glanced nervously in the direction of the two-leg fence, praying that the strange sense of Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw would keep Princess inside her own garden today. "Why'd you ask?" he mewed, stalling. "Tigerclaw mentioned it, that's all," answered Cinderpaw. She seemed genuinely curious, but Fireheart felt a dark quiver of menace at the mention of Tigerclaw's name. What else had Tigerclaw been telling Cinderpaw about him? "I was born a kitty pet," Fireheart meowed firmly, "but I'm a warrior now. My life is with the clan. My old life wasn't bad, but it's over, and I'm glad." "Oh, okay," mewed Cinderpaw, sounding unconcerned. "See you later." She spun around and charged off into the trees. Fireheart stood alone in the woods, his heart thudding as he stared at the two-leg fence. A moon ago, his words to Cinderpaw about being glad his old life was over would have been utterly true. Now he was not so sure. His fur tingled with the knowledge that some of his happiest moments recently had been spent sharing memories with his gentle kitty pet sister. And I believe that is where we will stop for the night. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. And I hope you have a good evening and a good night. So thank you for watching. Until next time, my friends. Take care.